You know what? It's cold here. Hello, everyone from Boston. Welcome to Our Driven Roads. Today is cold, wet, snowy, dark Mitsubishi Outlander. Believe it or not, but I wanted to get in this vehicle for a while because today Mitsubishi in United States it's kind of an unknown brand as far as I know. Mitsubishi Motors, it's just a small fraction of the entire Mitsubishi industry. It's fair to say that they're not paying too much attention to their cars. And yet I was interested to see what are their cars today. My family owned a Mitsubishi Montero some time ago, and I remember that car to be fairly reliable. It was about 20 years old when we sold it, and most of the issues it had was due to its age. So a lot of bushings were bad, gaskets, all sorts of stuff. But other than that, the car was pretty reliable. So I wanted to see what's the current or today's state of Mitsubishi. So to be more precise, I am in Outlander Limited Edition, which particularly in this situation adds a lot of technology or interior comfort rather than power and handling, which means that the car runs on a 2.4 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, and all that goes to a CVT transmission. It's only front wheel drive, but the interior is where you get the most out of the limited edition trim. Since this is the first Mitsubishi in the United States I've been in, I cannot compare it to the other ones, honestly, but this interior overall is pretty darn good. But let's start with the exterior first. So exterior wise, it doesn't look bad. It's definitely on the smaller size, I would say. I mean, it's more of a compact size SUV. It's in range with RAV4 and CR-V, but it's a little bit longer, which made Mitsubishi think that they can add a third row, which was a big mistake because it's kind of useless and it just eats up unnecessary space. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of the limited trim approach, which pretty much darkens everything out. Chrome pieces, body panels, and so on. On the front bumper, there is a small area where that darkened chrome starts to peel out, which looks kind of funny. As far as the interior goes, and here's the thing, I would say that exterior wise it looks better, a little bit more modern compared to the interior, because interior for the most part doesn't look bad at all. You have those kind of fake carbon fiber trim panels, which look fine. The overall dash it's kind of shifted towards the driver. It's driver focused, and when you look at the passenger side, it looks like the passenger has nothing. The layout of the infotainment screen looks pretty good, but there are issues. And first and foremost, there are only 2 rotary knobs for climate control, but there's no turning knob for volume, which sucks. I mean, it was proven in many other cars that you gotta have that dial or knob to control the volume. It's much easier to reach to find that button instead of using the touch buttons on the screen, which they are touch. You still have the buttons on the steering wheel, which are fine, but it still kind of feels strained, I guess. So that's one thing. The other thing is that those touch buttons on the screen, they do not light up in the night, and that's a big issue. You do not see them in the night, and unless you know their exact location, which again they're touch, they're not physical. So even if you go with your finger across this lower portion of the screen, you're not going to find them as easy as it would be if they were physical. The next stop, I think, where the biggest disappointment is the hard plastic buttons or inserts. You can look at them yourself. They look just like those auxiliary buttons you can find in a AutoZone or something like that, or you have an older car, and it's kind of the same thing I've seen in the previous generation RAV4. They look fine, but even in the limited edition trim I'm having right now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 empty buttons, and these are just like plastic inserts. Then you have some slot, I guess, with the key down here. Then the center console where your shifting lever is, it looks kind of empty. There's a lot of piano black plastic, which at 17,000 miles is already pretty scratched and looks bad. All these buttons could be on the right of the shifter, and instead you could have a much larger armrest with a lot more space inside, because as is right now, it's pretty small. As far as the rest of the cabin goes, well, there's plastic, some leather imitation, whatever. It looks fine for the most part. I'm still considering that this is a utilitarian vehicle, so it should provide versatility in space in the first place. A few words about the infotainment system though. It's fairly simple, it doesn't have much going on, but with that said, it has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. And honestly, you don't need more than that. This feature alone makes your infotainment system look a lot better. As far as comfort goes, these are nice seats. Combination of leather and Alcantara, or I think it's called suede or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. These seats are very comfortable because of this upper part. They hold your shoulders pretty well, and they have this sporty red stitching. Oh yeah, they have lumbar support as well. Overall, the second row was pretty good, which I cannot say the same thing about the third row, which is really compromised. They're only meant for kids, although I would feel claustrophobic if I would be there, even as a child, you know. I understand today's manufacturers are trying to give you that third row no matter what, and call it a mid-size SUV and stuff, but honestly, it's not worth it. With the third row up, there's almost no space left for the trunk. You can barely fit a suitcase in there. This is a more of a RAV4 CRV size of SUV, so there's really no point in having a third row. One last thing I forgot to mention about the interior is the button responsible for dimming your gauge cluster. Problem with that is that the button is not as obvious. I found it only the second day I had the car, and it's right here on the right of the speedometer. It's very small, and you have to press it to darken your gauge cluster, because otherwise you're going to be blinded if you drive at night. Now let's talk about engine and transmission. And I'm gonna say that I was surprised. It is pretty punchy. I feel like it gives you that punchiness you would get from a 4-cylinder turbo engine. And that's partially because it uses a Mitsubishi own, I think it's called MiVec, is their own naming for a VVT system. And that basically gives you power across a larger range of RPMs. And you can definitely feel that compared to the same again to RAV4, the CX-5 I drove. This definitely feels punchier, and as soon as you put in the sport mode, you can even feel some torque steer, which is still kind of unusual in a heavy car like this, but still. Even though it's only a 2.4 liter engine, it pulls pretty well. It has good power for passing on for daily use for sure. As far as transmission goes, this is a CVT, but honestly, it's one of the better CVTs I've ever experienced, because it feels more like a traditional automatic transmission. There's no gear hunting, although the moment you look at the tachometer while driving, you'll see the kind of RPM needle going up and down. So honestly, if I wouldn't been told that this is a CVT, I would think that this is a automatic transmission. As far as the ride quality, so here's the thing. The car is definitely old, and you can feel that. You can feel the body vibrating, and you can kind of feel it twisting, you know, under corners a little bit, and in those potholes. So it's not refined at all. I guess here's the traditional benefit of a newer car, of the newer cars. They ride on better platforms. They're a lot more balanced and can provide you with both relatively well handling and at the same time comfort. And this is where this generation Mitsubishi Outlander is suffering, because again, it's a pretty old car. Now let's talk about value. On one hand, I see a lot of Outlanders on the road, or Mitsubishis overall, which means people are buying them. And according to a video from Donut Media I watched not long ago, today's sales of Mitsubishi SUVs are much higher than they were in the past when they were selling small compact cars. I feel like if you can get this car in a good price with, I don't know, maybe not all the comfort features I'm having here. So the base Outlander model will cost you around $24,000. For reference, the $24,000 is the same price for a Camry, for example. But the amount of space and practicality you're getting here is much higher. And the fully spec'd out GT version with a V6 and all the safety features will cost you under $34,000, which is still a really good price. So I would say if you can find this in a pretty good shape and price, I wouldn't mind owning it. It's not the best; it suffers from age, but it's still decent. It does everything you need it to do. So the overall value for the amount of space you're getting, even with the compromised third row seat, it's still pretty good. So this is gonna be all for today. Thank you all for watching. It was an interesting experience for me to drive the Outlander. Let me know any comments if you have an Outlander or a Mitsubishi in general, and what do you think about it, and I will see you next time.